What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, May 8th, 2019, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Powhatan on Friday, and whatever insanity is going to be forthcoming then. So we have a lot to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. And let's start off by talking about Iran, because it looks like Iran has really become rather fed up with U.S. behavior here. Iran is pulling back on some of their promises in that P5+1 agreement. Now, they're not in violation of the agreement to higher levels in 60 days unless Europe acts. And Tehran is refusing to dispose of excess heavy water. And what they're basically trying to do is say it is up to Europe to protect Iran from the U.S. sanctions, either by continuing to do trade with it, doing more trade with it. But basically, the U.S. is putting tremendous pressure on Iran, and Iran wants to keep the deal alive. The rest of the signatories want to keep the deal alive, but Iran is signaling they're not going to be able to continue to do so. And they're basically saying that Rouhani announced today that Iran will be suspending some of its commitments due to continued U.S. violation and a failure of European signatories to compensate for the damage done by Washington, which of course is going to basically play right into the Warhawks' agenda here. But it's important to coming on out and saying that this is obviously a response to this external pressure, that Iran is being provoked. It was basically about a year ago that Donald Trump unilaterally just pulled out of the agreement and reimposed these crushing sanctions. And Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, "We see the consequences of rash the accord." So Iran and Russia's foreign ministers are urging the Europeans to fulfill all their obligations for the JCPOA survival. The U.S. government has been arm-twisting Europe to pull out of the agreement, to stop doing business with Iran. And again, it's a provocation. Russia and China have fulfilled their obligations, but other countries, particularly on the European side, have failed to honor all of their commitments to the agreement. So the U.S. government wanted that agreement to go away, and it looks like it's about to happen. Trump has issued more sanctions on Iran in response to Tehran saying it was suspending some of its obligations. Trump has signed an executive order imposing sanctions on Iran relating to iron, steel, aluminum, and copper, which are exports from Iran. And the new policy is aimed at denying Iran revenue from metal exports that could fund its alleged but never proven nuclear weapons program. And apparently a U.S. official is warning investors, banks, and businesses in Europe not to work with Iran in the wake of the United States' unilateral pressure on Iran. This is the United States throwing its weight around again and saying, no, 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 you only do business with the people we let you do business with. So apparently Europe is being warned about getting involved in the Instex special purpose vehicle. This was something that Europe was setting up to bypass SWIFT. And Tim Morrison over at the National Security Council, he's their senior director for weapons of mass destruction and biodefense, basically came on out and said, you should know that getting involved in the Instex special purpose vehicle is a very poor business decision. In other words, they're threatening Europe with sanctions. Okay. Now, despite the new sanctions, despite the increasing clampdown in Iran, China is ramping up crude oil imports from Iran. And apparently, in April, they surged to a record, despite refinery maintenance outages and tepid domestic fuel demand. So imports amounted to 43.73 million tons of crude, or 10.64 million barrels per day. So they're just pulling it on in there. Probably, I imagine they're going to stockpile a lot of it here. Mike Pompeo did a surprise trip to Iraq, and while he was there, came on out waving around saying, there's an imminent threat from Iran. There's an imminent threat. That Tehran is planning imminent attacks. So Pompeo abruptly canceled talks in Germany and made a lengthy detour from his European tour to spend 4 hours in Iraq, where he met both President Barham Saleh and Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi, and talked to them about the importance of Iraq ensuring that it's able to adequately protect Americans in their country. Now, there's a little bit of news out there. This was actually on Hal Turner yesterday, and it may be, again, more war lies here. Before we do that, though, shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Okay, this story, and this is coming from CNN, which means take it for what you're worth, is claiming that Iran has been seen moving some of their ballistic missiles by boats. Short-range ballistic missiles on boats in the Persian Gulf, and they're saying this is one of the critical reasons the U.S. decided to move an aircraft carrier strike group and B-52 bombers into the region, except we already know the aircraft carrier strike group was already in the region. So that was a little bit of a hoax. But apparently yesterday, U.S. Central Command spokesperson Captain Bill Urban said that they had seen indications that Iranian and get this next one. Iranian proxy forces were making preparations to possibly attack U.S. forces in the region. They're telegraphing a false flag. They really are. Over at antiwar.com, they have an article about how Trump is inching towards attacking Iran, how the Trump administration is deploying troops, warships, and bombers, with top officials talking up. So who's really calling the shots over there? Over at uns.com, they have an article. Does Trump have control of his government, or is it his government? And they're pointing out about how John Bolton, who's clearly Israel's agent here, has assembled a team consisting of himself, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Emirati Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, and Saudi ruler Mohammed bin Salman. These men are all Iran's worst enemies. And this article goes on to state the purpose of the team is to produce a false flag event that will provide an excuse for Washington to attack Iran. And the speculation is that Israel will shoot down an American aircraft or attack a U.S. Navy vessel, and Washington will have the prostitutes and correspondents blame it on Iran. In other words, a replay of so many of these things we've seen before. They're liking it to a revival of the Northwoods Project that the U.S. Joint Chiefs presented to President Kennedy in hopes of setting up a U.S. invasion of Cuba. Fortunately, that one was canceled. Over in Syria, militants fired another 12 reported, and that Western Hama, the Syrian Arab Army, had repelled a series of counterattacks by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham-led forces trying to keep control of all the positions captured in northwestern Hama. And apparently intense clashes took place near Tel Otman, where the SSA eliminated at least 5 militants. Now, despite this, the Syrian Arab Army has not been able to develop on its success and push further into the militant-held area. So apparently, clashes are still ongoing. Getting on back to Mike Pompeo and Iraq, when he was in there, he was making this declaration that he wants Iraq to be an independent nation, a sovereign independent nation not beholden to any country, except, of course, the United States. Now, the Iraqi media is reporting that U.S. Army helicopters were once again spotted dropping food and supplies to ISIS terrorists hiding in the Anbar Desert. And apparently they're very deep in the desert. It's very hard to reach where they are, except by air. And the Army helicopters are taking stuff into them. Apparently this is approved by the U.S. government. So this is not the first time U.S. helicopters have delivered aid to terrorists. The U.S. Army operates under an illegal coalition of similar evil countries, has been spotted delivering food and other aid to ISIS terrorists while the Iraqis were trying to clean their country from the terrorists in Saladin, Fallujah, Mosul, and Diyala. Okay. Yesterday we commented on this a little bit. There's an Israeli paper that claims to have the details of the still supposedly secret U.S. deal of the century for the Middle East. And it does suggest the creation of a Palestinian state on the Gaza Strip and some of the lands of the West Bank. The state will be called New Palestine. And the document doesn't specify the political structure of the new state, but indicates that democratic elections would be held within a year. Now, the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, the ones that Israel doesn't formally recognize, but shared by the status quo in handling, it's been reported in the Israeli media, is just a pretext for Israeli land grabs in the West Bank. Pretty clear that's what's going on over there. Over in Germany, as you know, Mike Pompeo was touring Europe, and he just canceled his visit to Germany in order to go down to Iraq. He was scheduled to speak with Chancellor Angela Merkel, and this cancellation prompted a Süddeutsche Zeitung journalist to basically say that German-American friendship is in shreds, and it's already time to start thinking about a strategy for the post-Trump era. And he pointed out there is a certain rudeness in the world of diplomacy, like missing important international meetings as foreign minister, and insolence, referring to Pompeo's announcement just hours before meeting Merkel. So that was a very undiplomatic thing to do. Earlier in the week, we reported on how CNN, they had 6 reporters on this story over at CNN, came on out with this claim that Juan Guaido is the elected leader of Venezuela, that he'd won the elections last January. Except, of course, there were no elections last January, and Guaido certainly didn't win them. The last elections were last year. Maduro won. Guaido did not even run. But apparently that is the new piece of propaganda they're trying to feed to you, because Mike Pompeo came on out and repeated this same claim, that Juan Guaido is the duly elected leader of Venezuela. And he was speaking in London after his meeting with Jeremy Hunt, and Pompeo told reporters that Venezuelans had elected Guaido to lead them. Pompeo said the Venezuelan people have spoken through their constitutional mechanism. They put Juan Guaido as their interim president, and he's the duly elected leader there. Then followed up by saying Maduro is on borrowed time. Okay. All right. So the reality is, though, Guaido's popularity in Venezuela is dwindling. His poll numbers are going down. And he's had 2 attempts to call for a coup d'etat, both of which have failed. And so they're saying, where could he possibly go from here? Short of an outright U.S. invasion to put him on the throne, where does he go from here? All right, let's take a phone call here from Joe in California. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Watching on YouTube, and it's been a lot of interruptions these first few minutes.
Yes.
Mike, I want to talk to you about Iran and Iraq, but first on Venezuela, I heard Daniel McAdams say that Guaido is basically worth more to the U.S. dead than alive, so he better be careful. He better be wearing that extra protection. So it reminds me of that.
Yep.
So you better be careful. Mike, on Europe and Iran, it's a foregone conclusion. Europe's not going to adhere to this JCPOA. I mean, you talk about the pressure brought to bear by the U.S., but it's not just the U.S., it's those APEC-like organizations in Europe. They
Yes.
have them as well. So Friends of Israel, for example, in the UK. So it's a foregone conclusion. This deal is gone. We're on our way to war. It's just a matter of when. And lastly, I want to ask you, and maybe that gentleman Peter from California, who used to be in the military, could answer this question. You mentioned the U.S. helicopters seen in Iraq reported by Iraqi media dropping supplies to terrorists, ISIS in the Anbar region. Don't these guys in the military, unless they're all special forces, and they're the biggest scumbags in the world, they'll do anything, or maybe they're black, they're academy people, but don't these guys know that they're dropping supplies to terrorists? I mean, or will they just do anything for a paycheck?
They're just following their orders, but you're right. These could very easily be special forces.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open. Getting on back to Venezuela, another whaler for Iranian terrorist regime to establish a safe haven for its terrorist proxies. And he said this in an address before the Council of the Americas. Boy, they are piling it up higher and deeper over there in Washington, D.C. Now, a lot of people are looking at Venezuela and saying that this is about the oil. It's about the oil reserves, the currency that the oil is sold in. But there's another player out there, and it turns out that is Monsanto. Because while numerous other Latin American nations have become a free-for-all for the biotech company, Venezuela has been one of the few countries to fight Monsanto and other international agrochemical giants and win. So the U.S.-backed Venezuelan opposition has been working to basically undo all of that. And so Monsanto is in there as well. We got to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And yes, once again, RBN is asking for your help. And the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity, cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can do a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. And again, for those of you who have been donating, our sincerest heartfelt gratitude because you are making a difference and you're making it possible for us to continue. Okay, so getting on back to the news here. Interesting little article that came out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently Russia and China are building and reopening over 455 bases along their north coastal areas bordering the Arctic Circle. It looks like the Arctic is going to be big business in the very near future. And this, of course, has prompted Mike Pompeo to basically come on out there and say, you shouldn't do this. And this has prompted a lot of people to say that with the exception of Alaska, the United States isn't really an Arctic nation compared to places like Russia, Canada, and Denmark. So from a geopolitical standpoint, Pompeo is trying to basically stick the U.S. nose into an area where it doesn't really have a legitimate reason to Washington are jointly pursuing, pointing out that it's aimed at restraining China and even the greater Eurasia by creating these military unions between countries. And this strong statement issued by the Sri Lankan ambassador to Russia might also have been intended to alter the dynamics of his country's ongoing deep state civil war. That North Korea's newest missile bears a strike, and it appears superficially to be nearly miles away. And such a system has the potential to challenge missile defenses in South Korea and further escalate tensions in the region. It also shows that North Korea is developing new weapon systems, even as President Trump expresses optimism about a future deal with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un and his attempt to reach a deal was all about North Korea's nuclear weapons program. And all of a sudden, it is now swelling to include North Korea's missiles. Same thing that Trump did with Iran. They had that P5+1 nuclear deal regarding Iran's nuclear activities, and then all of a sudden, Trump wants to swell it to include the ballistic missiles. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I hate to waste your time, but I have a couple of questions on the same subject. John F. Kennedy, when he was in that PT 109, necessary, or
basically came on in and joined the Allies against Japan. Japan said, okay, that's it, we have to surrender. Truman dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to demonstrate that we really did have them and had the political will to use them. And so a lot of scholars looking at heartland. In fact, one of the Japanese representatives was trying to get into the U.S. government to say, we want to talk surrender, and they literally would block him at the door because Truman wanted to go ahead and drop those bombs.
Okay. Now, what about the kamikaze, as the mass media had said? Were they really that dangerous?
Well, they were dangerous in a psychological sense in that it was very frightening to the U.S. forces that somebody would deliberately crash their plane into their ships. But overall, they turned out not to be all that effective. It was kind of an act of desperation by Japan. And of course, they had the air kamikaze airplanes we all know about. They also had a submarine called the Kaitan that operated on the same principle, one-man crew that would ram enemy ships. Anyway, Tony, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, over at the aircraft, rather at the Air Force, they are claiming to have had a successful test of a laser weapon being developed for stealth jets. And they call it the Air Force Research Laboratory Self-Protect High Energy Laser Demonstrator, which they were able to they call it that in order to use the acronym SHIELD. It's the SHIELD, Advanced Technology Demonstrator Program. And it's completed a series of tests where they successfully shot down several missiles with a ground-based laser. This all happened out at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. And they've developed this directed energy weapon that they say will eventually be molded into an aircraft pod. Fifth generation fighter jets and drones will soon have the ability to destroy surface-to-air and air-to-air missiles with laser beams. So I wonder how they dealt with the thermal blooming issue. Let's see. Yeah, I'm getting emails. Apparently, for some reason today, YouTube is really not carrying my show all that well. At the moment, it seems to be okay, but yeah, earlier it was just bouncing around. Well, it's not like you need to see my face. Anyway, article coming out of Zero Hedge talking about America's defense budget and how it's actually a lot larger than you think. Now, in his latest budget request, Trump is asking for a near record $750 billion for the Pentagon and related defense activities. This is an astonishing figure by any measure. If passed by Congress, it will be one of the largest military budgets in American history, topping peak levels reached during the Korean and Vietnam wars. But that $750 billion represents only part of the actual annual cost of the national security states. There are at least 10 separate pots of money dedicated to fighting wars. They sort of spread it around so you don't really see just how much of it it is. And it's estimated, looking carefully at all the U.S. defense expenditures, our defense spending right now is over $1 trillion a year. And a lot of it is misspent. A lot of it goes to pork barrel projects. A lot of it simply vanished. Remember September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld got up there at the Pentagon and said, whoopsie, we've lost about $3 trillion. and it should have been a huge scandal, but fortunately for Donald Rumsfeld and the Pentagon, the very next day, 9/11 happened. And one of the aircraft slammed into the Pentagon offices that were trying to locate where that money had gone. Turning to our domestic politics, and apparently the House Judiciary Committee voted 24-16 to hold Attorney General Barr in contempt. I don't know what that really means, but they're just out there about that. Okay, FBI Director Chris Wray, I'm starting to have serious doubts about this guy. He said yesterday he does not consider that court-approved FBI surveillance is spying, and that he has found no evidence that the FBI illegally monitored President Donald Trump's campaign during 2016. Now that puts him directly at odds with Attorney General Barr, who used that exact term of spying during his testimony. So, asked by Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a New Hampshire Democrat, if he would say the FBI is spying when it investigates suspected terrorists and robbers, Wray replied, "Well, that's not the term I would use." So they're weasel wording here. Now, Lindsey Graham was on Fox News last night reminding everybody that the author of the infamous Trump dossier, Christopher Steele, was on the Democratic Party payroll. And that, frankly, without that dossier, there never would have been the issuance of a FISA warrant. That was their entire case. So, now James Comey may be feeling the heat right now. Attorney General William Barr's comments on FBI spying. Again, there's a war over the narrative. The Democrats want the narrative to continue, Trump, 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 Trump. And the GOP is saying, no, we need to look at just how we came up with this 2-year-long farce. We need to look at the spying and interference that took place in 2016, and mostly that seems to have been by the Democrats. So Barr has made plain he intends to examine carefully how and why Comey, as FBI director, decided that the Bureau should investigate 2 presidential campaigns, and if in so doing, any laws were broken. So Comey's out there, and I presume he's getting ready for a war. Another little article on the same thing, Information Clearinghouse. There were foreign intelligence agencies interfering in the U.S. election, but it was on the other side. There was a broad, coordinated effort by the Obama administration, with the help of foreign governments, to target Donald Trump and paint him as a Russian stooge. This is coming from Larry Johnson. Okay. Righty. Mitch McConnell was out there saying that the outrage industrial complex, there's a new one, is still grieving over the fact that Mueller did not find Trump-Russia collusion. And they're still out there screaming about it. They're trying to extend the Russian investigation, saying, well, let's look at obstruction. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. And McConnell declared the special counsel's finding is clear. The case is closed. And it really is. Now, one bad move that Trump just made is he is exerting executive privilege over the unredacted Mueller report. And of course, that is fodder for the Democrats to come on back and say, well, it's obvious he's hiding something. And I agree. That's what it looks like. So that was not a well-considered move. All right, Representative Al Green from Texas, one of the first lawmakers who called for Trump's impeachment, is expressing his fears that if Democrats don't pursue impeachment, Trump will get reelected. And Green was on MSNBC, was asked about how unpopular impeachment was among the voters, And basically, correspondent Philip Mina press screen with recent polling numbers from Quinnipiac showing 66% of voters were against impeachment, including 38% of Democrats and 70% of independents. So it's not a popular idea. And I think those polls are the reason Pelosi is pulling back on this. Now, somebody has leaked 10 years worth of President Donald Trump's tax returns, or tax information rather, to the New York Times. The paper ran with it. And the paper reported that just yesterday, Trump's core businesses lost $1.17 billion from 1985 to 1994. Now, the Times said it received this information contained in the returns from someone who has legal access to it and confirmed significant findings in other public documents. Now, it's embarrassing that he lost that much money, but there's nothing illegal there. Although now there are calls saying, well, there should be a fraud investigation. All right. There is another article. This one came out of TaxProf. And it's basically saying, from a legal point of view, congressional committees do not enjoy unrestricted authority to demand anyone's tax returns. Okay? There's a federal statute that compels the IRS to furnish on request anyone's tax returns to some congressional committees, but the statute cannot transcend the constitutional limits on Congress's investigative authority. Congress enjoys a near automatic right to review a president's tax returns only in the impeachment context. You know, if things weren't so serious, it would almost be fun watching this infighting that's going on. And I kind of have to wonder how this makes this country look to the rest of the world to see this right now. Another bad move by Donald Trump. Last Sunday, he retweeted a post by Jerry Falwell. And Falwell had tweeted that the president should extend his term to 6 years to sort of make up for the 2 years stolen by the corrupt failed coup. And Trump went ahead and retweeted it. And again, he wasn't thinking very carefully because it's being seized on to claim that Trump is planning on canceling the 2020 elections. Article 2 of the Constitution states the president shall hold his office during the term of 4 years. Another bad move by Donald Trump on that one. Well, Bill and Hillary Clinton last Sunday, during the last stop on their An Evening with the Clintons speaking tour, came on out and said that Brett Kavanaugh got what he deserved during his confirmation hearing because of his role in investigating the Clintons back in the 1990s in the Vince Foster case. And Bill Clinton said he didn't have any problem making us put up with 3 years of Vince Foster nonsense that was a total charade. And of course, longtime readers and listeners know that, yeah, there were legitimate questions about the death of Vince Foster, that it did in fact appear to be a murder made to look like a suicide. Whistleblower and political prisoner Chelsea Manning has been in jail for nearly 2 months, and she has submitted a new appeal to the federal court asking for her release from jail. She is in jail, has been in jail since March 8th, for contempt of court after she refused to testify before a grand jury impaneled to bring charges against WikiLeaks publisher and journalist Julian Assange. And Chelsea is saying that to cooperate with the grand jury would be a betrayal of her beliefs about the grand jury process, and this grand jury in particular. And this is all going to be a frame-up anyway, because supposedly Assange is going to be extradited back to the United States of America for a failed attempt to break into a government computer in partnership with Chelsea Manning. The problem is the statute of limitations for that crime has already expired. More alarmingly, we're getting this from Karen Kwiatkowski. There are reports that Julian Assange is being force-fed psychotropic drugs in Belmarsh Prison. And apparently he's being treated with a chemical known as BZ. BZ is a powerful drug that produces hallucinations. And I think the obvious reason there is when Assange comes back to the United States of America, they want him in a mental condition where even if he comes on out and says, Seth Rich was the leak, they can say, oh, he's hallucinating. His mind is gone. His mind is broken. We broke it. All right, let's talk about the economic news. For most of the day, it looked like the stock markets were going to at least start to recover from the losses they suffered yesterday. But right at the close of the market, everything fell off a cliff. The Dow, I think, is 2 points in the green. NASDAQ and S&P are down in the red. And it's prompting people to ask, if the stock market is falling this much already, what is going to happen if there is no trade deal with China by Friday? And there may well not be. China's very angry at Trump's announced new tariffs. China's very angry at U.S. warships sailing in the Taiwan Straits in the South China Sea. It's a very heavy-handed foreign policy to be out there swinging your sabers at the other guy at the same time you want preferential trade treatment. I think China probably is thinking that maybe the U.S. market isn't that attractive anymore. Okay. Everybody's speechifying in the wake of Attorney General Barr's contempt ruling. And the committee chairman, Gerald Nadler, is out there saying, we're in a constitutional crisis. And we may have been for quite some time. Okay, DoubleLine Capital's Jeff Gundlach, in an interview with CNBC's Scott Warner, warns that the bear market is just getting started, and he is predicting there's better than a 50% chance that the trade talks will in fact collapse. And he also said there are other risks posed by the surging U.S. debt. Over at Shadow Stats, their John Williams came on out in an interview on USA Watchdog saying the real U.S. unemployment rate is 21.2%. That is close to what it was during the Depression of the 1930s. And he came on out and said basically the economy is tanking. And I'll contend it already has. We've not seen it in the GDP reporting. But the ultimate thing here is you have a collapse in the dollar. Another story, this one from Zero Hedge. And they're talking about how the CPB, Netherlands Bureau for Economic Policy Analysis, world trade volume fell 1.8% in the 3 months to January compared to the preceding 3 months. And they're talking about a global downturn, a synchronized global downturn in manufacturing. So the news is not good out there. And Donald Trump, now this article is out there saying that he's going to infuriate the Democrats. I think he's going to infuriate a lot of Americans. Actually, we have to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones now to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You covered 3 stories that I'd like to comment on, and they all show that, to me anyway, that Trump is doing what we elected him to do. Not in every way, but on these 3 stories. And one is with Barr, and Barr being, get contempt by the Congress. I'm happy about this. I want to see a fight between the deep state and the Attorney General. and the president. I want to see them go out. It tells me that the Congress and the Clintons behind the Democratic Party, they're all scared to death of Barr and where these investigations are going to go. This is a preemptive slander. That's all it is.
Yes.
And it's obvious. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong. He's not releasing grand jury material. Well, that's against the law. So on its face, it's ridiculous. Anybody with any ability to reason on their own knows it. And the only reason they're doing it is so they can say, oh, the man that the Congress found in contempt is indicting Hillary Clinton. The other story I'd like to comment on is Germany, and I think it's good that the Germans are angry at us. The Germans are a big CIA-controlled deep state colony. They run the EU. They brought immigrants into Europe. They're destroying Europe through Angela Merkel. They're corporatists. And, I'm glad to see that they're angry at Trump and the U.S. administration. That's a good thing. I hope Europe collapses, and I hope Germany, they've been eating our lunch on trade and taking advantage of the fact that they don't have to pay any military or they pay very little for their defense appropriations compared to the Americans. So I'm glad to see that. And the third issue is the Chinese. I'm really glad Trump was elected to go to have a trade war with the Chinese. He was elected to bring steel back to this country and to help bring manufacturing. If the Chinese are mad, then good. That means that Trump, in my view, is playing hardball. He's not rolling over like the Wall Street corporatists would, selling out all our industries to China, like the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes. So yeah, I'm all three of these stories are pleasing to me, and of course, there are things that Trump hasn't done that he promised. But on these three stories that you brought up earlier, I'm all for the way they're playing out. And I think that if the Chinese don't like our Navy, sailing our boats through international waters, that's tough. You know what? I mean, those ships have a right to go through the Taiwan Strait. That's
first of all, let's back off. Some of those waters are in dispute. China is saying they're not international waters, they're territorial. But my point about the way Trump approached the trade negotiations with China is at the same time that you are sitting down and trying to negotiate a favorable trade agreement to rebalance trade between the two nations, you don't go on out and do things that are going to deliberately antagonize your opposite party. And that was where it really didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's certain principles that we've always stood for as a nation, and that is the freedom of the seas. I mean, the Chinese can build an island somewhere and then claim it. Well, if it's international waters, and it has been for, thousands of years, that's too bad on the Chinese. I mean, they claim islands. They're building islands near the Philippines.
But I'm just saying the timing. The timing was rather poor.
I get you right. But, at the same time, I think Trump likes the chaos theory and the tension theory of negotiation.
Okay, well, Joe, I'm going to have to let you go here. We got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the economic news, and apparently China is saying that they will have no choice but to respond to the increase in tariffs, meaning they're going to put more tariffs on U.S. imports. This thing could easily spin out of control. And as I was explaining to Joe, the issue is not whether or not who owns that water and who has a right to go there. It's basically that when you're trying to negotiate with another country over the economy, you don't annoy them at the same time. You get the economy all settled down, then you go back and say, all right, now that that's done, let's talk about what's going on in the South China Sea. But it was a very reckless and heavy-handed thing to be doing. All right, we started to talk about this a little bit. Apparently, the Trump administration wants to redefine poverty downward. So back in 2018, a family of four making no more than $25,000 was considered under the poverty line and therefore eligible for federal, state, and nonprofit programs like Medicaid and food stamps. Well, Trump wants to drop that down even lower. So huzzah, huzzah, all of a sudden you're not poor, you're middle class, and you're cut off from all of these programs. Democrats are going to scream, of course. Let's talk about Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank has been around for a very long time. They've got a good public brand, if you will, but they haven't been doing all that well. And apparently some of Deutsche Bank's problems are still holdovers from the difficulties back in 2008. And a lot of experts are looking at Europe and saying they're really not bringing their banks into line. They're really not cleaning up the mess. Of course, the same thing could be said about here in the United States of America with all of our deregulation and the economy running out of control. Okay, another little article. This one is out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, there's, of course, been this crypto surge over in China, and the reason for it may be that Chinese banks are quietly running out of dollars. And apparently, authorities in China have begun soft capital controls on foreign currency withdrawals. By the way, there's been another breach, and $40 million in Bitcoin cryptocurrency has been stolen. It's amazing here. Story coming out of the Real News talking about the Russia-China alignment challenges U.S. hegemony. And again, they're trying to put the blame on Russia and China. But the United States is an empire in decline. It's losing influence around the world, politically, economically, and all Russia and China are doing, they're stepping in to fill the vacuum. So this article is saying foreign policy is not focused on the United States. It's focused westwards toward Central Asia and Europe as part of the One Belt, One Road initiative. And that's absolutely what China is trying to do. I think that China's going to write off the United States. They're going to write off this hemisphere. When they get that One Belt, One Road system up and running, there's going to be an incredible amount of commerce between the Far East and Europe. Probably down into Africa as well at some point. It's literally going to change global commerce. That's one reason why the United States is so upset. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Da in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, yeah, this is Dan. Did you see a story about Israel sending 1,000 soldiers to Honduras to train troops, police, on border protection?
Yes, I did, and I put it up at whatreallyhappened.com. I wasn't going to talk about it here on the radio show, but I think this is like the first time Israel has sent that many of its own troops to a foreign country.
Well, it says here, this would be the second time Honduras allowed foreign military personnel and the first time in Israel's history to send troops abroad.
Okay.
Yeah. To train troops for border protection, stop migrants fleeing to U.S., especially children, and fight drug trafficking, investigation, and counterterrorism will be offered as well. Okay, I didn't know if you had seen that or not.
Yeah, I did see that, and it certainly sounds good, and I'm certain that a lot of people would like to see the migrant hordes from Honduras get slowed down a little bit. But the question is, how long are those Israeli troops going to remain there, and are they being pre-positioned for some other purpose? Getting on back to the economic news. Well, actually, let's do our shout out to our on-air affiliates who just now rejoining our network. Apparently, Russia has had a problem with the giant Druzhba pipeline. This is the main delivery line for multiple European Union countries, especially impacting Belarus, Poland, and Germany. Now, Russia is Germany's largest energy supplier, and this blockage is going to turn into a financial disaster. There's an estimated 37 million barrels of contaminated crude oil accumulating in the pipelines spanning from Belarus to Ukraine to Hungary. Now, this is not a technical disaster. Apparently, this was done intentional. They're saying it was the result of organized crime and an attempt to cover up mass theft on the part of the oil executives. 4 people have been arrested. Okay. Getting on down to Great Britain. A Tory grassroots revolt has been threatened on June 15th if the Prime Minister does not set out specifics as to when she will leave Downing Street. But apparently a Downing Street spokesperson said Mrs. May is not planning to bring forward her departure. She is here to deliver Brexit in Phase 1, and then she will leave and make way for new leadership in Phase 2. So it's getting really, really tense over there in the Parliament. And again, the Brexit just seems to float in the wind. Prince Charles came on out and made a statement that he cherishes his bond with Germany. This in the middle of the Brexit turbulence, and wanted to talk about Britain's special relations with Berlin. All right. So yesterday we had that terrible shooting at that school in Colorado. Gun grabbers were quick to jump on the fact that this is pretty close to the 20th anniversary of Columbine, and the fact that this high school was actually rather close to Columbine. So police have identified one of the 2 shooters, and it's Devon Erickson. He's an 18-year-old high school student. He's apparently worked as a youth actor, and he's one of these 2 shooters accused of wounding 9 students in this K-12 STEM school located in Douglas County. Now, one of those students, 18-year-old Condrick Castillo, has subsequently died of his injuries. So one of the shooters pulled a gun out of a guitar case in a classroom and opened fire. And apparently, this Kendrick Castillo, literally, he got shot trying to take down the shooter. Now, the other little oddity here is they originally said they had 2 boys in custody. The younger one, they've now said, is actually a girl who is transgender, hasn't actually begun the process of medically converting over, but was dressing and acting like a male, and from the appearance they thought that she was a he. So they've got this transgender male. So how does this happen? Apparently, one of the motives that has been put on out there is that the transgender girl had been the subject of a lot of bullying and teasing. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Another sign of a decadent, declining country.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, when did Sticks and Stones Won't Break My Bones stop being relevant?
Yeah, but Mike, you look at what's going on in Washington. That's the fish rots from the head down. That's our supposed leadership. These are the people that are supposed to be leading us. They're all losers. I mean, but look at how it affects everybody here. You know, I mean. I'm still waiting, Mike. I'm still waiting for the wall to be built. I'm still waiting for the infrastructure thing to go on. Like I said over and over, there's nothing being done. It's just rotting away.
Yep.
You know. And Mike Pompeo, when he made that speech about the Arctic, did you listen to his whole speech? Because he mentioned at the one part of he basically said that's to connect the Silk Road, the new Silk Road. He said that. Like, he actually came out and said that, you know, the Belt and the Road is the new Silk Road.
Yes.
So that's part, but so they know, like, our government knows we're in decline. Like, they know we can't stop this, folks. You know,
no, we can't.
It'd be the World War. It'd be, you know, it's over. You know, you just can't stop this process. I was just seeing that they did a deal with the Philippines or something, the Chinese with the Belt in the Road now, or Malaysia or something. I mean, it's Italy, Greece also signed up now. I mean, Italy's in the heart of Europe.
Yes.
No? But do you see the United States going there and building infrastructure?
Well,
At all? Like our
not at all. The problem is the Chinese concept was absolutely brilliant. You know, a secure, you know, wave-proof, if you will, transit corridor connecting the Far East with Europe. And that was what made the original Silk Road so influential. It's just bringing that trade across. When modern shipping came around, the original Silk Road fell into decline. It wasn't needed anymore. It wasn't as fast. But by building up with this new rail system, yeah, they're going to bring it back. And there's nothing the United States can do about it. The United States cannot compete. This Silk Road, new Silk Road, is going to be a lot faster than commercial shipping could ever be. And along with the fact that the U.S. can't compete in manufacturing and nobody wants our agriculture. Yeah, this country's in trouble, and unfortunately it does look like too many people in Washington, D.C. are saying, well, let's just have a world war and we'll smash those people down like we did in World War II, and then we'll be ruler of the world again in the aftermath.
And Mike, Peter, who called in yesterday talking about like Mackinder's theory, he's absolutely right, because, you know, I watched the thing by rail, like something from China to head to like parts of Europe or so would like take 3 weeks by train. It takes like it takes 3 weeks less by train than by ship.
Yes.
So I mean, it's the rail system, and you know, that's landlocked. So it's a lot easier to protect landlocked, because remember, the only thing we got more than the rest of the world is a lot of aircraft carriers. But when you cut them out of the equation, what do you got left?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know. And yeah, I just think, you know, I'm thinking back. Remember when the war, like when Trump launched those missiles in Syria? Like, wasn't
yes.
John Bolton? John Bolton was in his cabinet at that point, right?
Yes.
I think. But like, he still has the dude in his cabinet. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think Trump's not. These people aren't going anywhere. You know, I mean, I just don't see Trump. I don't see Trump helping Assange. I don't see Trump getting rid of these people, and these people are bad news. Now, if Trump doesn't get rid of these people, you know, something nasty going to happen, because, like, it just don't seem like he cares or standing up, and then they're all diddly-dallying with subpoenas still, and they subpoenaed Trump Jr.,
Yep.
his son. I'm like, and then Trump's throwing more tariffs on, like China, and then you got throwing sanctions on. Do you see he threw sanctions on Iran for steel
Yes.
now, aluminum, copper? Oh my God! Can things get any worse? You know, I mean, geez.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, you know, like our leadership is just diddly dallying. I don't see any real people in Washington anymore at all. You know, it's just.
Yeah, they all seem to be sociopaths, but again, they're relying on history, because every time the United States government has gotten the economy into this much of a mess, they get out by getting involved in a world war. Crash of 1907, get out of it with World War I. Crash of 1929, get out of it with World War II. Crash of 2008, and we're already in a world war. I mean, let's stop, you know, being fuzzy about it. When you look at how many military actions the United States is engaged in around the globe right now, even the Nazis didn't reach that far with their military adventurism. So, yeah, this is World War III. Welcome to World War III, and, you know, have a program.
And, you know, I hate calling in bashing on Trump all the time, because, like I said, I voted for the dude, but I'm not the president of the United States. I voted for somebody who ran a campaign saying he was going to, you know, do this and do that and not get involved in this or that. But, Mike, you know, I don't know if you talked about it, he put somebody in charge of the EPA who said there's lots of, like, Roundup is like, doesn't cause cancer. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. And also the FDA has come on out and said they're going to reapprove it.
Well, I mean, how can anybody tell me he's on our side?
He's not.
You know,
He's on
at
the
this
side
point.
of big business.
Yeah. All right, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. And getting on back to the news here. Okay, over in Poland, there was this woman, 51-year-old woman, and she has been arrested for defacing one of Poland's most revered Catholic icons, the Madonna of, and I can't even begin to pronounce this, and apparently what this woman did, and I'm kind of wondering how she had enough time to do this, but she painted an LGBT rainbow halo around the head of Madonna and that of the baby Jesus, and apparently they found several dozen posters of the Virgin Mary with the rainbow colored halo in the woman's home. So they're basically, she's in trouble. She's in trouble over there. So looking at the article, it looks like she didn't actually get to the original artwork itself. She merely made up a poster to do that. Okay, presidential candidate Cory Booker has refused to answer repeated inquiries into whether or not he'd consider jailing American citizens who refuse to give up guns that they have lawfully purchased. Now, Booker is running on an anti-gun platform. He appeared with CNN's Poppy Harlow to discuss that his plan, if he wins the White House, he will implement executive action on gun control. He's going to close dangerous loopholes in gun sales, cracking down on unscrupulous dealers and gun manufacturers, and investing in communities impacted by gun violence. Well, those are all great sounding talking points, but the problem is there are limits to what a presidential executive order can do, or at least there are supposed to be. There's supposed to be instructions to the executive branch. The president can't issue an executive order that applies to ordinary citizens. It's important to keep that in mind here. Turning now to social media. So let's see, hang on a second. Facebook is banning right-wingers for political heresy. And this is coming from an interview in Sputnik with a cybersecurity analyst and former U.S. congressional candidate, whose name I forgot to include in my cut and paste. Now, back on the 3rd of May, Trump did direct criticism at tech giants in Silicon Valley for banning right-wing users and media pundits. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about social media and how it's just open censorship. They're not even trying to hide it. And apparently, Twitter just suspended a slew of pro-Trump accounts, including the MAGAphobia account, which was set up by commentator Jack Posobiec to track violence against Trump supporters. So the MAGAphobia account had defined the word as an irrational, unfounded fear of Donald Trump or his supporters. I guess they or bigotry toward those who voted for him. And there was a lot of violence. Okay, we're going to take a phone call. Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, Trump. What's on my mind is when you said about him lowering the poverty level.
Yes.
And that really struck a chord with me because I want more of our handouts and less of Washington handouts, because Washington gives to the. This is sort of a Apostle Thomas view. Washington's handouts, the bureaucratic handouts, are really giving to the world for the world, and it only gives pennies off the dollar to a cause. But I think as volunteers, we can give to spirit for spirit. In other words, we're giving from the heart, and we can do more of that if they won't tie our hands, and so we can give that way. I know food pantries can work really well now. There needs to be a program for milk, eggs, dairy products, because that's that's not something you're going to find at a food pantry. Those are things that mothers need for their children.
Yes.
And things like that. But there's a lot of things like our HEB here in Texas is giving now day-old things, stuff that's getting close to expiring.
Yep.
They're bringing them to the centers, and oh my gosh, it's fabulous. And that whole thing started with the Episcopal Church, with the good Gillespie family here at the Episcopal Church, and we went all around and we introduced the town to it. And it's really been, we now have a whole new building, and it's just going like crazy. We need to remain free to help each other, and I sometimes wonder how often we're going to have to hear shelter in place. You know, when things get rough and we could maybe really get out there and help each other, are we just going to hear shelter in place or some other phrase that just keeps our hands tied? We really need to be, I really think, you know, I'm living on, I saved up money, but it is getting spent, and I find there's a lot of ways to be frugal, and I think we should, these handouts, Washington handouts are not expeditious. They're not a good idea, and I want us to remain free to help each other as much as possible, because we have a lot of good programs here. We have free counseling. Oh gosh, I have a whole list. I don't have in front of me.
If I can cut in on here, I mean, right now our post office right here on Oahu, they're running a program where they put these little plastic collection bags in your mailbox, and then at the end of the week there's going to be a pickup, so that people can look through their pantry and find stuff that's close to the ex-date and load it in there to be taken off to deal with some of the homeless and hungry here. But you need to understand the reason so many people are homeless and hungry in this country is because the government is simply taking too much away from the citizens and not sending it back. It's being spent on the wars, it's being spent on Israel, it's being spent on other foreign governments to buy their cooperation. And our original Constitution actually had a ban on non-apportioned taxation. In other words, if the government taxes from you, it had to spend back to that state in the same amount. And we don't have that anymore.
I understand that, but I know when they get their stuff from the government, they're not going to be as well. You know, I mean, well, it depends on what you give to a pantry, but I'm worried about people's health, and I just think I think volunteerism, when things come out of our gardens like they used to when we had good, strong gardens going, and we gave a whole bunch to the food pantry every summer. There'd be after the farmers market.
Yep.
I was part of a crew that would collect up everything that the a vendor, I want to say vendors, but they're the local farmers.
Yeah.
Wanted to give, didn't want to take back, and it all poured into the food pantry. And this is good food. This is good food from people's gardens. This is the sort of thing I think now, see, things have changed so much. So many of our farmers have been forced into canning businesses where you can buy their stuff already canned, and because they can't afford their
so many of our farmers have been forced into bankruptcy. And don't forget, because of the flooding in the Midwest, we're going to be looking at some serious food shortages toward the end of the year. But it's not just food that's the issue. We're talking about people all of a sudden not being able to pay their rent or pay their phone bill or pay for medical care for their kids or any of that stuff. And, you know, Trump is trying to balance the budget to spend more on war and less on the people. All right, so got to let you go, Sherry. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our show here. I'm sorry I was distracted reading some text messages here. And so we're talking about corporately owned social media. We're talking about the blatant suppression of conservative points of view, the targeting of advertisers and so forth. It's out in the open. The war for your mind is out in the open. Everybody can see it here. So Twitter today has banned conservative legend David Horowitz and the Freedom Center. And Trump can complain about it, say bad things about it, but nobody's doing anything. Especially the Republicans. The Republicans need to understand this is all going to affect them in the coming elections. It already did back in the 2018 midterms. It's amazing here. Over in Baltimore, like they didn't have enough problems already, City Hall government servers have been infected by a ransomware virus. And government officials are saying it's spreading through their network. So Mayor Jack Young released a statement saying that Baltimore City core essential services are still operational, but it has been determined that the city's network has been infected with a ransomware virus. City employees are working diligently to determine the source and extent of the infection. At this time, we have seen no evidence that any personal data has left the system. Well, of course, that's not what ransomware does. So out of an abundance of precaution, the city has shut down the majority of its servers. Will provide updates as soon as information becomes available. All right. Yeah, ransomware isn't there to steal personal information, although I'm sure there could be a hybrid. The other day I was talking about just how many of these data breaches we're seeing, who is using this data, what is it for? And today we get this article out of ZDNet saying that nation-state actors and their affiliates are behind increasing amount of data breaches. These data breaches are being done by governments. Almost 1/4 of all data breaches are being done by governments or agents acting on behalf of governments. This is coming from Verizon's Data Breach Investigations Report. And it's a bad thing. Bad thing. Now, Mike Pompeo is out there screaming that China is going to conduct more cyber attacks against the United States. And he's saying that the U.S. should be ready for China conducting more cyber attacks in the future. This was a speech at the Center for Policy Studies in London. This must have been before he changed his plans to go to Iraq. So the Apt 10 group, acting on behalf of the Chinese Ministry of State Security, to steal intellectual property and sensitive commercial data from Europe and from Asia and from the United States. We appreciate the United Kingdom publicly calling out China for that cyber attack, but there will be more, and we must be vigilant. Well, if you go back to that Verizon report, it looks like right now countries all over the world are getting in on hacking each other's computers and copying off the data. So apparently, U.S.-based cybersecurity firm FireEye claimed in March that the Apt 40 hacking group conducted a cyber espionage operation targeting crucial technologies to bolster China's Navy. All right. Now, it's a little alarming here. Apple and Google have pulled 3 dating apps from their online stores when it was revealed they allowed children as young as 12 to create profiles. And Apple and Google got warnings from the FTC. And according to this letter, which also went to Ukraine-based Wildek LLC, which owns the apps, the trio of dating apps allowed children as young as 12 to participate in the service and communicate with adults. And even more alarming, the organization says they were able to identify and confirm children within the service using a built-in age filter that allows the users to search by age. And apparently, Wildek's dating apps were used by potential predators to find victims. Well, whatever happened to just hanging out with the people you meet at school? And what is a 12-year-old doing with a dating app anyway? And I still cannot get my mind around this idea of adults having sex with children. I don't get it. I don't think I ever will. I don't want to get it. I just think it's disgusting. Over at Samsung, they've run into a little bit of snag over the Galaxy Fold. This is their new little high-end $2,000 cell phone that unfolds into a mini tablet. And apparently they've run into trouble because they've sent out early review units for evaluation, and apparently they're breaking. So Samsung is going to cancel all Galaxy Fold pre-orders if they can't find a fix by May 31st, and if customers don't confirm they still want it despite the delay. Now, the Galaxy Fold was supposed to be released on April 26th, but they weren't able to because of the breakage problems. Now, this is a little Orwellian. Over at Digit Lab, they have a new app called Hate Incident Reporting. And basically, you put it on your phone, and if somebody says something that offends you, even if it's not to your face, you can report them to law enforcement. So, talk about an attack on freedom of speech and freedom of expression. To me, this is clearly an attempt to just get us all so scared to say anything that we don't talk to each other about what's going on. And you know, the Nazis did the same thing to the people of Germany. They created this myth that the Gestapo was everywhere and heard everything, and just scared the German people into silence, which was their big mistake because they wound up losing their country. But anyway, apparently gone are the days when Americans were unafraid to voice their opinions or even make jokes in public. So apparently this new Digit app allows total strangers to report someone for exercising their First Amendment rights. My next question is, where is it actually illegal to be offensive, and why would law enforcement be involved? It's not like law enforcement doesn't have a lot of other things to do, like write traffic tickets, prevent crime, arrest the rapists and the burglars and the muggers, and now they want to take up police time by saying, oh, you said something that offended somebody. What, are they going to start writing tickets for that? They actually had that in Demolition Man, Sylvester Stallone, when he wakes up in the future and he uses a bad word. There's a little printer right on the wall that says, you are in violation of the Public Speaking Safety Act. It spits out a ticket. We're getting dangerously close to that right now. Now, a lot of companies are using facial recognition. They're putting it in at the airports. They're putting it in at stores. There is a little bit of a problem here because there were 8 trials carried out in London between 2016 and 2018 of facial recognition at the shopping center in Stratford. And it had a 100% failure rate at actually finding real criminals, and wrongly identified innocent people as potential criminals 96% of the time. One 14-year-old black schoolboy was fingerprinted after being misidentified. Now, police were allegedly stopping people for covering their faces or wearing hoods, and one man was fined for a public order offense for refusing to be scanned in Romford. Now, Scotland Yard calls the trials overt. Some money on it. They're putting it on out there. They're promoting it as something that would be good for public safety, but it makes mistakes, horrendous mistakes. It's like with all these self-driving cars that turn out to just not really be very good, and the manufacturers come back and say, well, keep your hands on the wheels anyway. You look at so many things that are being sold into the marketplace that aren't tested, aren't safe, vaccines being one of them. And it looks like it's a symptom of American corporations just trying to make as much money as they can, as quickly as they can, because yes, they understand things are about to get ugly. Between an economic crash and a potential world war. Well, it's not potential. We're in the world war already. Over at CNN, who have only sort of slyly apologized for that goof about Venezuela having elections last January. They were having a discussion on primetime with Chris Cuomo on Monday, and they were talking about the legality of a state-level fetal heartbeat bill. Now, this is basically a bill that says once you can detect the heartbeat of the fetus, you cannot have an abortion. And CNN contributor and New York City Democratic politician Christine Quinn came on out and said, well, when a woman is pregnant, that is not a human being inside her. So guest Rick Santorum asked host Chris Cuomo if he disagreed that at the moment of conception that a child is human and alive. Cuomo replied, it's viable. When Santorum asked, is it biologically a human life, Quinn shouted out, no, it is not. And again, I don't understand this contradiction where the Democrats are out there pushing abortion all over the place, pushing depopulation, Planned Parenthood. At the same time, they've opened the borders and are flooding immigrants into this country. They're literally remanufacturing the population of this nation. What they want. Now, there was recently a movie called Captain Marvel. It's one of Marvel's female superheroes. And you would presume that feminist social justice warriors would be very happy about that. But no, you're not. And apparently Brie Larson, who played Captain Marvel in the movie, she's known for being a social justice warrior. And she's now facing calls to resign her role, which is, of course, her most lucrative acting gig to date. And social justice warriors are demanding that she be replaced by a gay woman of color. So, identity politics. See what happens with that. I don't know how the latest Avengers is doing. I know they had a killer opening weekend, but I don't know if it's holding up. Over in Arizona, they're seeing a surge of hepatitis A cases, mostly in the Tucson area, but also Metro Phoenix. And it began in November. Cases have continued to rise despite efforts to step up vaccinations. The Arizona Republic reports the outbreak could take months to rein in. Well, we know that one of the major sources of hepatitis A is the homeless population, especially out in California. They got infected, they're spreading it around to each other. And where did it come from for the homeless population? We know that people are coming across that southern border carrying all kinds of diseases, including Hep A. They're not being quarantined, they're not being checked. Even in the heyday of immigration back during the Ellis Island Statue of Liberty, the immigrants coming in from Europe had to go into a quarantine to make sure they weren't sick before they were released onto the mainland. If you look at Ellis Island in Google Earth, you can see the quarantine buildings are still there. Today, no, absolutely not. Wide open border. Immigrants are coming across, drugs are coming across, who knows what diseases are coming across. It is an absolute disaster. By the way, an update on Attorney General William Barr. His contempt of Congress is a civil citation, not criminal. So at this point, it's not going to go anywhere. I think it was just grandstanding by the Democrats. They wanted that report. He was not legally obligated to give it to them. And so they fined him in contempt of Congress and wagged their fingers at him collectively. Okay. I'm looking at all these ads here for like the Klobuchar Town Hall. And it is amazing. This is only May of 2019, and already we're in full-bore campaign season. I think probably most American voters are just going to be sick and tired of this stuff by the time the election rolls around. I remember back in 2016, I was saying exactly the same thing. I'm tired of watching this stuff. Is there nothing else going on in the world? other than this politician standing up and making another speech. Okay. The FDA, as you will recall from, I think it was yesterday, has reapproved or recommended reapproving glyphosate for use in the American marketplace and I guess around the world. And it's proof once again that the FDA is on the side of the corporations because there's considerable evidence glyphosate is a dangerous, dangerous chemical. But the FDA said, nope, we're okay with it. When we get back from this commercial break, we'll tell you about another chemical the FDA has said is okay. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And the FDA has just approved a new vaccine to prevent dengue fever. It's called Dengvaxia. They're aimed at Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories where dengue is a problem. But the vaccine has a very, very dark and deadly history because they were using this exact same vaccine over in the Philippines. It harmed 100,000 children. It actually killed some of them. There were lawsuits all over the place. And basically, experts are saying this actually increases the risk of a severe condition. Apparently, children who receive the vaccine, if they get dengue after getting the vaccine, which tells you the vaccine isn't working, it can actually make it worse. So apparently there were articles in the New England Journal of Medicine, and Dr. Scott Halstead, who studied dengue for more than 50 years with the U.S. military, and he said, looking at the vaccine safety data, he said, there's clearly a problem here. You know, for many of those children, the vaccine didn't seem to work. And he said when those kids caught dengue after being vaccinated, the vaccine appeared to worsen the disease in some instances. Specifically for children who had never been exposed to dengue, the vaccine seemed to increase the risk of a deadly complication called plasma leakage syndrome, in which blood vessels start to leak the yellow fluid of the blood. Ooh, that sounds disgusting. Now, little side note about dengue fever. It's another case of having an illness that may not be as bad as the vaccine, because most people who get dengue fever never develop any symptoms. They don't even know they have it. About 25% will come down with what feels like a mild flu. That's what happened to me when I got dengue down on the Big Island. And it's only a small percentage that develop the full symptoms. And of course, we don't want anybody to have to do that. But once again, we have the FDA approving a vaccine with a bad track record to rush it into market. They have really dropped the ball over there. Okay, over in France, at the Technival 2019, they were out there having, basically a rave, and they got hit by a sudden, unexpected snowstorm, and 30 people had to be treated for hypothermia, and a lot of the people there were literally sheltering under survival blankets distributed by the Red Cross. So it was one of these festival camping experiences that turned into an endurance test. So gosh darn that human-caused global warming. So let's talk about Notre Dame. We're probably going to have to take this story through the station identification. As you know, this classic... Oh, there's the music right now. All right, when we come back from station identification, we'll pick up with Notre Dame. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we could use a few phone calls in here, I think, this third hour. So we're talking about Notre Dame, this beautiful cathedral in Paris, which lost its roof and some of the interior in this tragic fire. And people are still pointing fingers over that and saying, what happened here? Was it really an electrical fault? Was it the tools being used by the repair people? Was it somebody's idea of arson, because apparently Christian churches and mosques are being targeted all across Europe, and you don't get much more Christian church than Notre Dame. So they're already looking at repairs to the 850-year-old cathedral, and already the idea of simply replicating the existing roof and spire has been discarded, and architects are coming on with all kinds of new ideas about what they want to do with it. So there's this award-winning architect, Vincent Calabo, and he submitted a design that will turn Notre Dame into a modern, eco-friendly building. And it's basically going to be this peaked roof. It'll be a continuous curve from the edges of the roof up to where the spire used to go. It's all going to be glass, and it's going to have plants that they're going to grow food and literally give away to the poor of Paris. And apparently it's also going to generate electricity to make Notre Dame self-sufficient. Now, I know a lot of traditionalists are going to be very upset about it, and especially in Paris, people tend to sort of like lock into what was, and they get very upset about new things. When the Eiffel Tower first opened, the Parisians were just horrified. And then when it finally came time for it to be taken down, which had been the original plan, then the Parisians said, no, leave it up. Same thing with that glass and steel pyramid in front of the Louvre. A lot of Parisians hated that. So Parisians are going to hate this as well. But I looked at the drawing, and I don't know, maybe it's because I lived in Southern California where we had the Crystal Cathedral. But it doesn't look bad to me at all. Doesn't look bad at all. Now, we're all familiar with the concept of a light emitting diode, or LED, and they are sold with this idea that they're going to last for years and years and years. And unfortunately, a lot of bad products were put out with them, in particular the area of flashlights, where you'd buy the flashlight because the card said LED bulb, good for 12 years, and then after only a few months, the other parts of the flashlight start to break and wear out, in particular the little plastic battery carrier, and you can't get a replacement for that. So what do? You throw the flashlight away, you go buy a new one. Planned obsolescence. Now, over in Detroit, they mounted a major overhaul of their streetlight system to replace the earlier lamps with LED illumination. So far, so good. Unfortunately, it's starting to fail just a few years after being installed. And some of Detroit's neighborhoods are sinking back into darkness. Now, the authority behind this overhaul of Detroit's streetlight system filed a federal lawsuit Monday against the manufacturer of nearly a third of the city's 65,000 streetlights, saying that a fix is expected to cost millions. Now, the company is called Leotech Electronics USA, and basically said upwards of 20,000 of these LED lights are prematurely dimming and burning out. In fact, the Public Lighting Authority is expecting a system-wide failure of Leotech's LEDs in the short term. We actually have a similar problem here in Hawaii. A couple of years ago, they started replacing our traffic lights with old conventional tungsten bulbs with these LED panels, red, green, yellow LEDs, and figured, well, that would be fine. And here in Hawaii, we can get away with that. Other cities on the mainland that have tried that have discovered that because the LEDs don't generate any heat, the snow and ice will build up on them. So they have to go on out and clean those. Here in Hawaii, that's not an issue. But what is an issue is, again, the LEDs are starting to fail. And is it just that LEDs aren't all that they're advertised to be? Or are there simply too many manufacturing shortcuts? And with these LED panels, if you lose one or two LEDs, that's not a big deal. But there are some of these streetlight panels where like half of the entire panel has now failed, which to me looks more like a wiring problem than an LED issue. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network here. The United Nations has come out with a new report saying that up to 1 million species are at risk of extinction. They're calling it an environmental apocalypse. Well, it certainly sounds very serious until you remember that species go extinct all the time. Since life began on this planet, 99.999% of all life that ever lived here has gone extinct. That's just how nature works. Now, obviously, there are some cases where human activity and pollution are impacting species, and there ought to be a concern there. And I do like nature, but I think we need to start putting the focus back on human beings, like those children in Yemen who are still going hungry. And I have to raise my hand to the United Nations and say, what are your priorities here? Now, here's an interesting development. Apparently, scientists down at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, which is pretty much the deepest spot on Earth that you can do, they've discovered a bacteria that has the interesting little feature of eating petroleum. And scientists are saying these could be hopefully brought to the surface, decompressed, and used for cleaning up oil slicks. That would be a really, really good thing there. Maybe just drop a bunch of them down to the bottom of that Gulf of Mexico. Not too long ago, the Nevada Museum of Art sent a sculpture called the Orbital Reflector up into space. It was sent up into space in early December with SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket, along with several other small satellites. It was designed to eject from the satellite and open into a diamond-shaped balloon that would reflect sunlight back to Earth and be visible to the naked eye. And I imagine it probably would be. I'm old enough to remember the ECHO project, which was this 100-foot wide mylar balloon that was put into orbit to experiment with passive radio reflection. And it stayed up there for a very, very, very long time. But it was bright, and when you saw it, you knew it was there. However, for the Nevada Art Museum, there has been a problem. During that 6-week government shutdown, NASA lost communication. They couldn't keep people working to keep track of the satellite. They could not get the go-ahead to inflate the balloon. That's because many federal employees ranging from NASA scientists to the FCC were put on full or partial leave during the period. And as a result, by the time the government resumed 35 days later, all communications with the satellite had been lost. Well, I'm hoping that NORAD is tracking it. Otherwise, it's just another piece of dangerous space junk up there. Now, here's an interesting little article. Apparently, a team of scientists led by the National Nuclear Laboratory, working with the University of Leicester, have succeeded in extracting americium from some of Britain's plutonium stockpile. Now, americium is not found in nature. It's a byproduct of the decay of plutonium, which itself, of course, is produced during uranium fission in nuclear reactors. But it's very hot, it's very radioactive. They hooked it up to a thermocouple and found it could generate enough electric current to light up a small light bulb, which they have in a shielded area because, again, it is highly radioactive. But they're saying this could be a breakthrough in terms of using americium in radioisotope power systems for deep space missions that could last for 400 years. That would be a really, really cool thing. Okay. Now then, let's take a look at what's been happening during the show here. So Attorney General William Barr, now that he's through his contempt civil citation, he's beginning, supposedly, an investigation of former FBI boss James Comey, with everything, including Hillary Clinton, now on the table. Go get him, William. I hope you're the real deal, and we're not just being led down the primrose path again here. Rush Limbaugh has gone on the warpath, exposing the lies of Hillary Clinton and the gang. And that's a good thing. And it's a change of position for him, because back when this whole Vincent Foster thing was starting up, and I was trying to basically get it out there that this was a murder made to look like a suicide, Rush Limbaugh was out there defending, oh yeah, it was a suicide. Oh, it was a suicide. He was horribly, horribly depressed. And he wouldn't talk about any of the stuff the Clintons were doing, like the Arkansas drug running. But apparently he has now changed his tune on that. Oh, this is ugly. Apparently, if you have type 2 diabetes and you're taking a newer class of medications, you may get into trouble. Apparently, this medication is triggering what's called Fournier gangrene. And it's a flesh-eating disease that attacks your genital or anal region, and it can kill a lot of tissue very quickly. But it's apparently a safety concern for people taking diabetes medications known as SGLT2 inhibitors, according to the FDA. Well, that's a cheerful little thing to have happen to you. Apparently, Amazon has been hit by an extensive fraud. Hackers are siphoning merchant funds. It's like wide open season out there for people running on computers. We already talked about Assange. And okay, I could use some phone calls here. I'm out of my talking points. But I do want to talk about this social media deplatforming and censorship situation. I'm 66 going on 67. Never in my life have I seen Americans write to talk with each other and communicate with each other under such a dire threat. Whether it's being filtered or deplatformed on social media, or that Digit Labs app where people sitting next to you could report you to the police for saying something that's offensive. Our freedom of speech is under attack. They don't even need to repeal the First Amendment anymore. Americans are too scared to actually use it. And the social media deplatforming, it's not just about conservatives, it's about protecting corporate interests. They're deplatforming health sites, sites that challenge the medical orthodoxy. And we have gone totally fascist in this country. We really, really have. Okay. Somebody just wrote on in the email, people will wake up and make a move when Facebook bans the sitting president. Yeah, well, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Twitter's going to ban him. Boy, would it happen if they did. Okay. Looking for this as well. All right, so Facebook is now saying they're going to suppress all websites that aren't officially recognized by Wikipedia. And Wikipedia banned whatreallyhappened.com a long time ago. It's a full court press. They're moving very, very rapidly. And this is a huge, because Facebook has been a primary traffic driver for new websites of all kinds, including news sites. But according to Breitbart, ClickGap appears to have been designed to promote websites that managed to build up their readership and following before social media became a thing. Well, that would apply to whatreallyhappened.com. So the system will naturally favor the older establishment media outlets like CNN, Washington Post, the New York Times, etc., some of the biggest drivers of fake news in the era of Donald Trump. And yeah, it's another blatant attempt to shut out the independent media competition. I mean, we had 2 years of the corporate media feeding this garbage about Trump colluding with the Russians in 2016, and that's why poor Hillary Clinton lost her election. It's so sad. Those people still have their jobs. They're very well paid. None of the people who lied to us about Saddam's nuclear weapons ever lost their jobs. Those CNN reporters who claimed that there were elections in Venezuela last January, they still have their jobs. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Robert in London. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Yes, yesterday I had trouble with the internet, as I explained to you yesterday about my radio going down, and also on Monday, Fox, I've used Fox. What's it called? My web browser.
You mean Firefox?
Firefox. I've been using that for so many years, and on Monday, they killed all my add-ons to the Firefox and some updates, automatic updates. And they talked about this closing down of people being taken off YouTube, etc. And I think it's very much they're building up to the war, and they need to grab hold of the talking points. The system needs to grab hold of the talking points and re-establish control over the people. The narrative. Because it's all because the Iran, is it Venezuela, somewhere, anywhere, please let's have war. We need to control the narrative. So anybody who's not controlled, we need to control quickly.
That's theory. Basically it, is recapturing the narrative, because again, we know that these wars are all being started with lies. We know that corporate media lies. Sure. That CNN whopper about elections in January being a good example of that. And right. if there's one place where the independent media has had an impact, it's that we have basically retrained the American people. Back at the height of the original Cold War, 1950s, 1960s, going into the 1970s, the American people trusted the government. They trusted the corporate media. They believed what they were told. They believed that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, or at least they did for about 30 years. Now they're having their doubts about that. And the U.S. government, corporate media want to go back to that golden age. The problem with that is that if independent media is driven out of existence, it's not like people are going to overnight go back to just trusting everything they see on the TV sets and at those podiums where the politicians are speaking. The trust is going to be gone. The American people are becoming very cynical. And the fact that they're shutting down the independent media, it's very alarming. Anyway, Robert, stay on the line. I got to take a commercial break here, and we'll be back with you after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Robert in London. We're talking about the internet, and there are a couple of overlapping issues to look at. And one of them is the general decline in the quality of service by companies such as Spectrum, which we're having to deal with here. And the fact that so much of what we deal with related to the internet and computers has become, I think, almost unusably complicated. And what's going on is all these little devices and trinkets and phones and tablets are being designed by people where that's all they do. That's their entire lives, and so of course it all makes perfect sense to them. And then it gets put out into the marketplace and it's bought by an end consumer who is like just befuddled and dazzled by all the additional buttons and switches on it. And that can be an issue. Speaking of the decline in the quality of service. A lot of people wrote in to complain about how my YouTube feed was not working very well today. That too may have been Spectrum, because at one point during the show, I sent a single email to our board operator at RBN. It arrived 10 different times. So there's some problems there. So,
Crazy.
Robert, do you have anything else to say?
Well, yes. Actually, there's a couple of things I want to say. Not just a slight change of subject. You mentioned Leicester just a few minutes ago, right?
Yes.
There is no place in England called Leicester. It is called Leicester.
Ah, Leicester. My mistake.
Because we Brits live in Britland, and we call Leicester Leicester. I know you read it as Leicester.
Yes.
But we say it as Leicester.
Well,
and that's just how it is. Yeah.
Okay. I'll accept the correction on that one. I mean, I didn't get up that far when I was in Britain.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, can I just tell you a funny little story? I've actually, the way the Americans, I follow YouTube a lot, and I am so used to the American attitude. I have worked with Americans since, back in 72, actually, and the way that on the YouTube, people complain about what's going on in America, etc., and around the world. The talking points have been from 72. In those days it was Vietnam War, etc.
Yes.
But not only the Vietnam War by any means, but just the whole American lifestyle was just really so abhorrent to so many people, that I worked with. And they would just talk about their home country in terms that you talk about your country on your channel. So I'm so used to it. So all I'm saying is that what's wrong with America? It's been talked for the last, 50, 60 years, and it's, I've got lots more to say on that, but I don't want to be too winded. But can I just say can I give you just a funny little story?
Yes, but make it fast, please, because we're almost at the commercial break.
Very fast, yeah. In my church, we had a team that ventured. They wanted to go to Paris. They wanted to open a new center in Paris. So a coach load of people filled the coach, and they wanted to be French. They wanted to look French because you want to look the common person. And the idea of a French person was the little cartoon chap with the blueberry and the striped jersey, Tintin, I think his name was.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, so Tintin was your typical French person, right? So everybody went to Paris, like a whole bus, 30 people, and they all were dressed with the blue striped jersey and the blueberry. And they got to Paris, and they got off the bus, and there was nobody who wore what they wore.
Yeah, I could almost kind of see that one coming.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was a true story. I didn't see it myself, but my friend told me. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over here to Joe in California. And Joe, I'm probably going to have to take you through this next commercial break. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Mike. A couple of things I wanted to reply to. First, thank you, Robert in London, for correcting. For all these years, I've been saying Leicester. So, yes, Leicester. Thank you so much. And thank you, too, for the funny story. Mike, regarding the Notre Dame, did you... I was away for a while. I haven't been listening. Did you report the story it was from Mondo Weiss about what the Israeli rabbi said about Notre Dame? It was divine justice that it burned because it was revenge for the Parisians. Evidently, there was a large scale burning of the Talmud in the 13th century.
Yes, I remember.
This was divine justice.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't know what these, a lot of these Israeli, these radical extremist rabbis in these settlements. One of them came out with a statement about how Hitler was was right about everything.
Okay, Joe, got to put you on hold. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Joe in California. We're talking about the fire at Notre Dame and how this rabbi came on out and said that it was divine retribution for the burning of the Talmud in the courtyard, which makes as much sense as claiming that Notre Dame was set on fire by the Knights Templar because their last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was slow roasted to death in that same courtyard. So, but again, it's a very hateful thing for that rabbi to say.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is. I mean, it's just in general how the corporate media ignores such things. Where if a Muslim cleric says something, or if a priest says something, something that either is racist, can be interpreted as being bigoted or racist, they're called on it. But seems like the rabbis are always given a free pass. But my main reason for calling Mike was for Joe from Tennessee. Hearing Joe, it seems like Trump is doing a great job, and he's not. Trump, in my view, Trump is a criminal. He's not a stooge of Russia. He's a stooge of Israel. But regarding China, Joe in Tennessee has to realize that there are companies in the U.S. that are doing business with China, that are shipping goods to China, and their receivers, the importers in China of these goods, there's a lot of confusion right now. The whole business is in limbo because they don't know what types of tariffs their government is going to impose as a response to what the U.S. is doing. So a lot of businesses in the U.S., yes, you're right. We don't have the manufacturing that we once had. But
Yes.
There's still a lot of companies that do business that export to China, and right now their business is in limbo because they don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I wish people like Joe would study the issue more before opening up their fat mouths.
Well, let's not get personal here. Let's keep our discourse civil.
No, but hearing Joe, it seems like he's speaking from the podium of the White House.
I'm sorry?
I said, hearing Joe seems like he's speaking from the podium of the White House.
Yeah, I did get that sense. He's a very, very pro-Trump, and he's trying to talk Trump up. But I think in the long run, this trade war with China is going to cause a lot more damage to the United States than it does to China. We've seen that before with a lot of these other sanctions. It backflashes on our own industry.
Absolutely. And sending ships through the Taiwan Strait or to the South China Sea, I'd like to see what the U.S. would do if China sent some battleships off the coast of New England or in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
I'd like to see what the U.S. response, these neocons that Fat Pompeo or Bolton would do, or Trump's real bosses. I'd like to see what they would do, what they would force Trump to do if the Chinese or the Russians did the same thing. No, but when the U.S. does it, or when the U.S. sends vessels in the Black Sea, it's a good thing. They're just testing the freedom of the seas. That's an outrageous argument, and it's just patently wrong.
Well, it absolutely is, and it's just the U.S. government trying to patrol its empire, and that's really what it's about. But my issue with Joe isn't whether or not the U.S. has a right to send those ships through those waters. The issue was one of timing, that when you are trying to talk to China and reduce tensions in the economy, you don't poke them in the eye by sending ships through the Taiwan Strait and into what China says is their territorial waters in the South China Sea.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just fed up, Mike. You can hear it in my voice.
Yes.
Trump is the deep state. Trump is the deep state. There's no deep state war between the deep state and Trump. He is the deep state. He hasn't drained the swamp. He's brought in the likes of Pompeo and Bolton and these other people. I don't know how Joe can say, and other people who can say this. And trust me, Mike, if and when this war with Iran starts, the so-called deplorables, the people like Joe who love Trump, who supported him in 2016, they're going to be the first ones in line supporting this war. Trust me.
Yep. I think you're absolutely right. Trump has basically given the deep state almost everything that they wanted.
Absolutely.
And so I keep scratching my head and saying, why is there still so much animosity? I mean, over on the Fox News feed here, they're still going on about, well, the next step after Mueller's report, we've got to open up more investigations. So I don't know exactly what's going on, but Trump is a disappointment, I think, basically sums it up.
But it's become a cult, like with Hillary Clinton. It's become a cult. He can do no wrong. He campaigned against these wars, and yet here we are. We could have one with Venezuela and Iran. And, of course, the wars in Syria continue, and the war in Yemen continues as well. So he's been a complete, unmitigated disaster.
Yep. I'm not going to argue against you. The only way I would ever support him in 2020 is if Hillary runs again.
I feel the whole system is corrupt, Mike. Even if Tulsi Gabbard, I support Tulsi Gabbard just on her anti-war position. But even if she were to win the White House, she would be the same. She wouldn't be able to enact her agenda. She'd be the same. She'd be handcuffed. She'd become a warmonger. She'd have the likes of John Bolton and Pompeo. Call me cynical. I believe that's what would happen. That's how corrupt our system is. They have an iron grip on the system. These people.
Yes.
That even a person like Tulsi Gabbard, she couldn't get her agenda, her anti-war agenda through. Not a chance. It's impossible. The interests against her, the money involved, no way, no chance.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say I agree with you. It is a systemic problem. And again, looking at my prognostication that the U.S. government is headed for a Soviet Union-style collapse, it becomes predictable that we would be going through this kind of period of partisanship and just infighting, visible in public view infighting among the various politicians. But I think this nation is headed for a crash. I just hope they don't take the rest of the world down with them in a nuclear war.
I just want to say one thing where Trump's wanting to his policy. He wants to lower the threshold for those who are living in poverty to bring that number down. The inflation numbers are underreported. You hear a guy like what's his name from Shadow Stat, John Williams from Shadow Stats. The inflation's a lot worse than the government reports.
Yes.
So you're going to lower these numbers. You're going to make it even harder for these people. And I'm not one for handouts, but look, all the offshoring of jobs, they created this problem. They created this problem.
They did. They did. They absolutely did. They created this whole mess here. And one of the ways that they rig the inflation numbers is they don't include the price of food, which is where inflation shows up first.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to get that off my back. I mean, Joe's a good guy. He's intelligent. I can tell that. But I got a little emotional. But I feel like people like Joe, they need to step back from their devotion to Trump and just look at things. Look at the cold facts and what he's done and what he promised that he was going to do, what he hasn't done.
Yes.
So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Well, thank you for the phone call, and we're going to let you go. And the phone lines are now open. And I just got a text message from northern Colorado saying that there is a freeze warning for tomorrow night. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. What can I tell you about that? Okay, we've been talking about how science is corrupted by money. And there's this story that came out of the Daily Mail, no less, saying that Coca-Cola underwrites a lot of research at universities regarding their product and product safety. But experts going through the documents have discovered there is a clause in there where Coca-Cola gets the research results before anybody else and can legally basically shut down the research and walk away with the data. And, if you want your money, you'll sign the contract. And that's basically what it is. Researchers say the legal clauses they found mean that Coca-Cola could suppress critical health information and may have already done so. But there is no way of knowing if so, what, when, and to what extent. Okay. Now, getting on back to Robert in London, there was a problem with Firefox this last week, and it came on down to the expiration of an intermediate signing certificate, which is used to authenticate third-party Firefox add-ons and extensions. And apparently the certificate expired, somebody wasn't paying attention, and all the add-ons shut down. In some cases, people lost actual work. I mean, with the reactivation of the certificate, the add-ons came back, but a lot of people just actually lost work. So that's what happened with that. Another article, this one also from the Daily Mail, talking about your little household helper device. And they're talking about Alexa and how basically, yes, it is listening to you. It's eavesdropping on your housemate's gossip. It's recording details about insurance policies. And apparently, for some reason, is even listening to the family dog. One user found his Alexa repeatedly activated to record the same guest in their house gossiping about work colleagues, while another one was recorded in a private discussion about their insurance policy and another about a dream job. Apparently, in one household, Alexa woke up 13 times to record the dog barking. So that's kind of a scary, scary thing here. Apparently over in Texas, they're proposing a law that would ban junk food purchases on food stamps, which I think makes a lot of sense. That stuff is not healthy. And it's just more profits from the big food conglomerates. Another little piece of news from space. If you've looked at a lot of the photos of astronauts on the International Space Station, it sometimes looks like their heads are a little puffy. And it turns out that researchers have found that spaceflight changes the way fluids shift in the brain's ventricles and basically push the fluid in the ventricles upwards, causing them to slightly expand 3 ventricles in the brain. And apparently the skulls will stretch, but it can also lead to vision problems. Okay, story out of Investment Watch blog. Let's make a deal. Trade war cloud over 2020. Wall Street on edge. They should be. And like I said earlier, today's stock market looked like it was on its way to recovering some of yesterday's losses. And at the last moment, it just hit a wall. All right, so and this is kind of a little weird. Over at the Common Sense Show, you do have to be careful about what's going on. Yesterday, Hal Turner was out there saying that there was a preemptive strike on Iran that was to take place today. He was echoing that story about Iran is moving their missiles around with boats, but it didn't happen. This is over at the Common Sense Show, and normally Dave Hodges is bang spot on, but he's running this article about how a deep cover source reveals that 8,000 Russian Spetsnaz troops are poised to attack American infrastructure. And it's more propaganda. I'm sorry, I don't believe this. I don't buy this. So apparently, this all goes back to the Obama administration, because in 2013, they invited Russian troops for terror drills on U.S. soil. And following that, FEMA signed, pardon me, agreements to cooperate with Putin's Russian's emergency ministry. Well, that doesn't sound like all that terrible thing to have happening. It was back when we were still kind of semi-friends with Russia. But that's a very scary story and a very scary headline. And I'm concerned that somebody is going to read one of these headlines and they're going to act on it. Alrighty. A while back we talked about how the New Mexico governor closed the border checkpoints. just let them sit empty, no staff in there at all, left them wide open. And so it's no surprise that the drug cartels are pouring their product through there. And it's just coming on in. All right. Right now in this country, there are 4.2 million unsold cars. If the economy is so great, why are 6,000 stores scheduled to close this year? The economy's not good. I mean, it just isn't. We know they're lying about the unemployment numbers. We know they're hedging, fudging, cooking the books on the rate of inflation. They're probably cooking the books on the GDP. And again, going back to the reference to the former Soviet Union, toward the end, the government was lying to their people about everything, just trying to keep them calm, trying to keep them in their place, not get them upset, just tell you whatever we think you want to hear, so you'll just go back to work and do what you're supposed to be doing. I hold, of course, that a government that lies to its people has no respect for the people. And we're not talking about classified military information here. We're talking about the economic numbers that we're being lied to about. And I've read that Constitution, and nowhere in it does it give the government the authority or the right to lie to the people. In fact, the way this country was set up, it was the other way around. The government was answerable to the people. We were supposed to be in charge. We were supposed to keep an eye on that government and make sure they did what we, the people, needed. Because the proper function of any government is to do collectively what the people cannot do individually, and that's pretty much all. And today we have this bloated government that no matter how much money it takes from you, it can't balance its budget. It's still spending money like crazy. If you think about it, Trump's lowering of the poverty level is just another way of taking money away from American people. And for all we know, all of these cyber breaches that are stealing all this cryptocurrency and everything is just another way that government spy agencies are plundering the nation to keep feeding the war machine. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with our last segment after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today on Hump Wednesday. And we're going to go back to the phones. G in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, what's up, Mike? You said you like flight simulators?
Yeah.
You never thought about getting into like those RC planes with the FPV on it, and like you can just see what it's looking at, which on the remote and whatnot?
I mean, I've seen them, and I've seen drones that do pretty much the same thing, but I just I don't have the time or the money for such things.
Yeah, they're pretty fun. They're pretty fun. If you're in a flight simulator, that's definitely something you want to get to. Yeah, they're a little pricey, but it's a hobby. It's like a project. You just gotta put some time and effort to. But hey, Mike, I wanted to. A couple minutes ago, you were talking about Coca-Cola.
Yes.
How they were saying some stuff. I was watching something on RT how they were investigating Coca-Cola's. They were making some commitments on how, because they were trying to tackle the world's pollution problem, and what they were doing is they were trying to say that they were going to start making their products with more recycled plastics, and like I said, I can't remember. You got to find. It was on RT today or yesterday or today, and they were saying how the Coca-Cola, they were lying about how much plastic they were actually recycling. These corporations, I mean, they say all these stuff that they're going to do all this and they're trying to help and stuff, and they're really not. They're just lying.
Yep.
Yeah, they're just lying. And if people want to want to change the way the world is, I think people just got to start boycotting and just start taking action and just buying stuff that, you know, that doesn't help their pockets, because that's what it ends up to. If you're buying their products, you're helping them out. You're empowering them, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's all about getting your money out of your pocket and into their pocket. And the products are made more cheaply, value engineered, I think it's the phrase they like to use. And the prices go up. And you can see that every time you go down to the supermarket, where the packages are just a little bit smaller and the prices keep going on up. It's to maximize their profitability. Now, I don't drink Coca-Cola. I haven't had one in years, mostly because they stopped using natural sugar and instead went with high fructose corn syrup, which I can't tolerate, and I don't like the artificial sweeteners. It just tastes too chemically. I do remember Coca-Cola from when I was a kid, and it had a much better taste back then.
Well, I remember that the Coca-Cola, the original ingredient, actually had cocaine in it. But
yeah, it was originally sold as a patent medicine.
Yeah, and now, I mean, they got some Coca-Colas you can buy that doesn't have the high fructose corn syrup. You gotta really look for it.
Yeah.
You gotta dig deep, and there's certain stores that sell it.
They had it out here in Hawaii briefly, but they stopped sending it out here. Another reason I want to get back to Indiana is there's so much stuff that you can buy on the mainland. It's just not here. Anyway, there's the music. Gee, we got to let you go and sign off. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here and at whatreallyhappened.com and share it with everyone that you know. Right now, person-to-person communication is our best means of spreading the truth in the face of a corporate governmental structure that's trying to drown us in lies. So have a good rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.
Tired of being